844-631-1848 to speak with a licensed Aetna.
Battleground New York City, the fight for your vote. Your front row seat to the battle for New York's next mayor. It's the old guard clinging to power, chasing a candidate they never saw coming. Every night, our experts break it down.
What New Yorkers want above all else is authenticity.
We're listening to the people who matter most, you, the voters. And when the candidates sit across from us, nothing's off the table. What's your plan to make New York City feel like a safer city?
S.E Cupp, that's your perception. Of course, there's a lot of crime.
So what's happening right now? Let's dive in. Welcome to Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. It's finally Friday, y'all. It's Friday, October 10th. We're just 25 days away from this all-important New York City mayoral race. That feels like it's around the corner. Later in today's show, we're going to get to some analysis of the latest polls and talk about this race, both from a local perspective, but also a national one. But first, I'm going to give you some news, okay? The Mamdani media tour continues. Today included a lengthy interview on Morning Joe on MSNBC, and there were some tense moments. There was some back and forth between Mamdani and Joe Scarborough. One issue that Mamdani has struggled with over the course of this campaign, and one that matters a lot to New Yorkers, is the issue of public safety on the streets and schools, on the subways. Let's take a listen to how that conversation went.
A lot of people are afraid if they elect you, you're going to take your eye off the ball on making New York a safer place. You're going to be hostile towards the police. You're going to change the police commissioner. What do you tell those people who are concerned about safety, quality of life issues, homelessness, people that don't think, liberals, don't think it's progressive for somebody who's mentally ill to be sleeping on a grate when it's 4 degrees below zero?
Let's be clear, it's not progressive for that. And quality of life actually has to be at the heart of any progressive politics. And public safety will be the cornerstone for delivering our affordability agenda. And this, what we've seen right now, is...
So you're saying you're putting public safety...
It is
as job number one.
It is a critical
Keeping
focus.
New Yorkers safe.
Absolutely.
Making sure that when kids walk to school, they can walk there safely. When they're in school,
Absolutely.
You like cops.
Look, yes,
you like police officers.
Our police officers are going to be the ones we partner with to deliver public safety. And I just want to say a few things, which is that when you ask New Yorkers where do they feel least safe, they'll often tell you when they're using public transit. They'll say, when I'm on the subway, when I'm in the train, I'll see a homelessness crisis, a mental health crisis, and we've asked cops to be responsible for these crises, whereas their jobs should really be focusing on serious crimes. And so our vision is allow officers to focus on shootings and murders and the serious crimes that we know New Yorkers are concerned about, and have a Department of Community Safety that deals with the mental health crisis, that deals with homelessness, that actually deploys dedicated teams of mental health outreach workers to the 100 subway stations with the highest rates of these incidents to take those New Yorkers out of the system of the subway and connect them with the services that they need. That's how we're going to deliver.
And if they stay in that subway, if it's the same person day in, day out in that subway, you will give them the authority to make sure they're taken out of the subway.
Yes, this is the focus of the Department of Community Safety, is to connect them with services. And if, after we exhaust each and every issue, involuntary confinement is there, but it should be a last resort of what we do.
Okay, let's move on to another issue. The breaking news yesterday that New York Attorney General Tish James has been indicted by President Donald Trump's DOJ on charges related to mortgage fraud. What did frontrunner Mamdani have to say about this, about Donald Trump, and about Andrew Cuomo? Let's take a listen.
What we're already seeing is a White House that is engaging in the political persecution of its perceived enemies, right? We're seeing that whether we're talking about Attorney General Tish James, whether we're talking about others across this country. And what is so enraging for so many in this city is that Donald Trump ran on 3 promises. He ran on the punishment of his political enemies, he ran on easing the cost of living crisis, and he ran on engaging in a program of mass deportation. It's that second promise of the cost of living crisis that brought so many to his campaign, and yet he's unable and unwilling to deliver on that because he's beholden to the very billionaires that are profiting off of that crisis. So what he's doing is focusing entirely on this agenda of punishment and cruelty. And what I would do is to actually stand up for New Yorkers. And what I mean by that is you can see in this race right now, the other candidate that is running for mayor is Andrew Cuomo. He released a statement yesterday speaking about this indictment of Attorney General James. He couldn't even name her. he couldn't even name Donald Trump. And he couldn't do those things because he knows that his narrow path to City Hall is paved by the very billionaires who put Donald Trump back in the White House. And Donald Trump's getting a good return on his investment right now because he's seeing a mayoral candidate, a former governor, unwilling to lift a finger when we see this unprecedented attack, not just on our democracy, but on an attorney general whose only crime is standing up for the people of New York.
Okay, Mamdani was also asked about Trump's threats to send National Guard troops into New York City, as Trump has done in D.C. and Chicago. Here's what Mamdani had to say about that.
I would, first of all, agree with Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, who has made clear that there's no need to deploy the National Guard here in New York City, not for safety, not for security. We trust the NYPD to be in charge of delivering that very thing. And I don't even have to think about the hypothetical of what Donald Trump will call for from me, because he's already called for me to be deported. He's already called for me to be denaturalized. He's already called for me to be arrested. And these are the kinds of threats that we know we will have to walk through to defend the people of this city, and I'm prepared to do that.
And finally, here's Mamdani on the Jewish vote and anti-Semitism in New York City.
First of all, to be clear, not only am I not anti-Semitic, but there's no place for anti-Semitism in this city, this state, this country, or this world. And my job is not only to protect Jewish New Yorkers across the city, but it's also to cherish those same New Yorkers. So it doesn't just mean increasing funding for anti-hate crime prevention programming by 800%. It doesn't just mean sustaining and increasing police presence outside of synagogues on high holy days so that Jewish New Yorkers can worship without fear. It also means ensuring that we're embracing a curriculum.
So good to hear Mamdani on these issues in his own words, given extended time to answer, but also with a little pushback. And I expect we'll hear more from Mamdani and the candidates as the weeks go ahead, including at those crucial upcoming debates. Up next, we're going to break down the brand new poll that shows that this race has gotten a little closer as we head towards Election Day. Don't go anywhere. More Battleground NYC after the break. We're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. And joining me now for the bigger picture is Evan Roth Smith, a campaign strategist, founding partner of Slingshot Strategies and lead pollster at Blueprint. Evan, I really want to talk to you about the brand new Quinnipiac poll. But first, I just found out you grew up with Zohran Mamdani, which is amazing. I wanted to know if anything you just heard in that first block from his Morning Joe interview really stood out or sounded like maybe the guy you knew from childhood.
well, sure. You know, Zohran has always been a political person, and it's remarkable to see, of course, anyone you've grown up with and known for many years in the place where Zohran finds himself. But it's remarkable, especially to see him on a show like Morning Joe, sounding like most other mainstream Democrats when he talks about someone like Donald Trump and pushing back. Especially in the context of the campaign, he's been painted as, this extremist. And of course, he holds progressive views within the Democratic Party. But some of the scaremongering that goes on, or the most intense attacks around him, that he's so far out of the mainstream, that he represents some sort of existential threat to America, right? That this has been implied by President Trump. And then you see him on television. He kind of sounds like, Hakeem Jeffries or Kathy Hochul talking about the threat that Donald Trump poses to New York City.
Yeah, it is interesting. And it's hard, for me covering it, right? It's hard to see from a voter's point of view sometimes, like, is this him moderating because he's in a general election now? Or is it just the more you hear from him, the more you actually peel back the layers, the less scary he sounds? I'm actually not sure. What's your take?
Well, I think he's a charismatic guy. And also, there's only really one view on Donald Trump within the Democratic Party, right? And the more that Donald Trump looms large in this election, the more scary he becomes, as we see what's happening in places like Chicago, where he's really inserted himself into that city via the National Guard, and Los Angeles before that. And there's some thinking that we're next. There's only one Democratic response to that, which is stay out and stay away. And so when Zohran gets to talk about Donald Trump, he sounds like every other Democrat, and that's a lot less scary to even voters in the Democratic Party in New York who may have been skeptical of him during the primary or are skeptical of him now.
Okay, I want to get into this poll because, Evan, we've been waiting. We've been waiting for this poll. I've been like, every morning I get up like it's Christmas. Is today the day? We've got a poll since Eric Adams dropped out, because I just want to know whether the case Cuomo was making, which was, if Eric Adams drops out, I'm going to do better, was true. And the poll was very good news for Andrew Cuomo. He gained 10 points in this poll. He shot up from 23% to 33%. Now, he's still trailing Mamdani's 46%. But what did you make of that 10-point upshot in the week after Eric Adams dropped out?
Well, it's funny because buried in many of the other polls across this cycle before Eric Adams dropped out were additional tests that many of these pollsters did, including Quinnipiac, but also including Siena and Marist and Emerson and other folks who have looked at the race, Beacon Research. They were also checking what it would look like if Eric Adams dropped out. And so what we're seeing in this poll is basically the realization of what everyone predicted would happen, which is a meaningful but not game-changing increase in vote share for Andrew Cuomo. Now, they, I'm sure, are glad to see it. They, I'm sure, are glad to see themselves north of 30%, right? He's now just caught where he was at the end of the Democratic primary, right, where he was in the 30s. So he's just gotten back to where he was in that election. But Eric Adams going out of the race, of course, freed up, call it 10% of voters. Quinnipiac had it at 12 in their last poll. Some other pollsters had him in single digits. So let's say 10% of voters were freed up by Eric Adams, and many of them have gone to Zohran. To Cuomo.
Cuomo, right.
Yeah.
Do you imagine, though, that this is a ceiling for Cuomo? Like, is that telling you most of Adams' voters went over to Cuomo, but that's as good as it's going to get for Andrew Cuomo? Or are there more undecided or gettable voters out there? And who are they? Are they Republicans? Are they older Black voters who have typically been a stronghold for Cuomo? Are they moderates who are scared of Mamdani? What would you tell Andrew Cuomo to do to go get more voters between now and Election Day?
Well, the voters he really needs are still locked up by Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee. That would seem to be where Andrew Cuomo is most likely to find any additional votes he gets. There aren't a ton of undecideds in this race. Even voter groups that in this poll broke very strongly for Cuomo, like Jewish voters in New York who go for Cuomo about 2-1. There are not a lot of them left on the board. There aren't a lot of undecideds, period, in this polling. So the question is, how many of these Curtis Sliwa voters are going to leave their guy, who's still in the race and is going to be on the ballot, and flip to Cuomo? So, maybe it's hard to imagine Curtis Sliwa dropping into single digits. So maybe there are another 5 points to find for Andrew Cuomo. Now that could put it into a single digit race, which may loosen things up a little bit for him. But that's a long slog, and he's already trained a lot of his fire on Curtis Sliwa. We'll see how much more he can really get out of that.
Yeah, listen, I was a New York Republican. I don't know that you could have paid me to vote for Andrew Cuomo. That feels like a leap that if you're a real Republican, right? From Sliwa to Cuomo seems like a big ask. I don't know. We'll have to see. Let's talk favorabilities, because the poll had a lot of stuff in it. And one part showed that Mamdani's actually the only one above water on favorability. Cuomo and Sliwa's unfavorables are higher than their favorables. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me it's going to be a challenge for Andrew Cuomo to pass Zohran Mamdani, right? He's not just underwater in favorables. A majority of the electorate views Andrew Cuomo unfavorably.
Yep.
Right? And in fact, Andrew Cuomo is polling below his favorability. So there are voters who view him favorably who aren't voting for him yet. And Zohran Mamdani is polling above his favorability. So there are voters who aren't so sure about him, but are still going to pull the lever for him. That is not the calculus that you want if you're Andrew Cuomo. And of course, many of those voters are probably, as you spoke to, people who for years felt that Andrew Cuomo was not good at his job. Maybe they're Republicans, maybe they're conservative-leaning independents in New York, who for a decade were told, hey, he's the big, bad, evil Democratic governor. Now it's a tough order to vote for him.
It is, yeah. Let's talk about experience, because the poll also shows that really inures to Cuomo's benefit. He's leading Mamdani on the question of who has the right kind of experience to be mayor. 73% say Cuomo does. Only 39% say Mamdani does. But considering Mamdani is up generally, does that tell you that experience actually isn't what's motivating most voters? Because they're picking the inexperienced guy anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot of voters will say, well, if you have experience with what New York has been like in the last 10 years, I'm not interested, right? You may have that experience, but I'd like to see some change. And certainly Zohran was elected to enact some sort of change in this city. Maybe voters don't love someone with so much experience in the New York that they've lived in.
Right now. Yeah, that's really interesting too. Okay. Mamdani and Cuomo are neck and neck on the issue of crime and public safety, interestingly, with 35% of voters saying Mamdani would do the best job and 32% saying Cuomo would. Did that surprise you?
A little bit. You'd think Cuomo would have eked out a much clearer advantage on crime and public safety. But, the question was, who's going to keep you safe, right? That's how Quinnipiac phrased that question. And Zohran, while it's not leaning too hard into the police as a way to keep people safe, we have a cop as mayor right now. And guess what? People thought that might lead to something, that a very pro-police administration might lead to some gains. And to some extent it has, at least with S.E Cupp as commissioner. But, I think people are willing to try something new. And so long as the vision is on target, as you heard Zohran talk about, yes, we will really work to connect people in public transit on the street who are sleeping rough with resources, and if necessary, mandatory moving them off the street. That connects with people too. However you get the job done, I think is what people are asking for.
Okay, Evan, stay right there because I've got lots more questions for you after the break. More Battleground NYC right after this. And we're back with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. Joining me once again is Evan Roth Smith, founding partner of Slingshot Strategies and lead pollster at Blueprint. Okay, Evan, I want to get your take on Mamdani's outreach to business leaders. It's a group that's been a bit skeptical of his campaign, at best, at worst, hostile to his campaign. He made his pitch at the Association for a Better New York forum yesterday. Now, is the resistance of this community, whether we're talking about Wall Street or real estate developers, is that actually helping his campaign in a sort of, fight the oligarchy way where he can say, well, the billionaires aren't with me and that's fine with me? Or does he actually need to bring some of this group on board?
Well, I do think they're helping him in that it makes his case clear that, hey, I care about affordability. I care about the little guy, the working New Yorker, the people who are most squeezed in this economy. And you know what? I'm going to pay for the stuff I want to do for you out of the healthy profits and healthy bank accounts of the richest people and companies in this city. So it doesn't hurt his case. But I do think he needs some of them on board, right? And they are going to have to get on board, right? If you're a company looking to attract talent or build real estate in the city, you need some sort of relationship with City Hall, and you want New York City to be a successful place. If you're JP Morgan and you're competing for talent against, Bank of America, you need New York City to be better than Charlotte, right? And so they are going to want and need a successful Mamdani administration just so that New York City is an attractive place for talent and for development and for people living here.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma because he doesn't. He seems to be benefiting from having them as adversaries to get elected. But once elected, he will need these constituencies institutionally to get a lot of the stuff that he needs done, and they'll need him as well. Okay, I want to talk about Curtis Sliwa, who we had on yesterday. He's really owned the issue of crime on the streets, crime in the subway, and for decades, right? That's his deal. If you're advising Curtis Sliwa, do you tell him, make that your entire personality, make that your entire campaign? That's the only thing you talk about.
I think it's tough because what's the daylight between him and Andrew Cuomo in terms of what they're talking about? Now, Curtis Sliwa may be more credible, right? New Yorkers know that this has been his whole life. But Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa are talking about basically doing the same things or taking a similar approach, right? In terms of, hey, police forward, grow the head counts, right? Now
well,
again,
Sliwa
maybe
he's changed his positions a little bit. Now he doesn't want to close Rikers, right? I mean, he's really had to moderate to the center on that issue. He was no cash bail. They're pretty different on that issue. Actually.
They are, but I think most voters look at them and say, okay, this is a tough on crime sort of continuation of police first or maximal policing in terms of how we get ourselves out of this. And I don't know that there's enough difference there. Right? Again, Curtis is more credible and he's holding on to the voters he has because he hasn't waffled on that. But it's hard to see where he finds the daylight with Andrew Cuomo on that issue, and so that might be a real problem for him.
Okay, Evan, we've got one more round of questions for you if you're game, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this with more Battleground NYC. we're back one more time, Battleground NYC, with Evan Roth Smith, founding partner of Slingshot Strategies and lead pollster at Blueprint. Evan, I want to open the aperture a bit. The government is shut down, as you know. There's blame to go around, from Trump to Republican leadership to Democrats, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. How do you think that's shaking out politically? And do you think voter anger over this could rub off on this New York City race?
Well, I think the way it's shaking out nationally is largely to Democrats' benefit. Now that isn't always the case with the shutdown when a minority party shuts down the government. Right? We've seen this go different ways. We did some polling at Blueprint last week that showed that voters were more likely to blame the Republicans for this, and I think that's in large part because Donald Trump and the Republican Party are kind of out there doing anything and everything they want to do. So when you're mobilizing the National Guard into cities, when you're going and cutting deals in the Middle East, when you're kind of acting with a sort of omnipotence around American politics, it's very hard to go, well, except for this one thing, that's the Democrats' fault, and voters just kind of aren't buying it too much. Now, in terms of the race, again, I do think it helps Zohran Mamdani as the Democratic nominee when just Democrats are all on message against Donald Trump. He sounds very alike to other folks in the Democratic Party when he's talking about Donald Trump. And most Democrats in New York City agree with him on this stuff. So it's probably to his benefit. It reminds me actually of a moment a couple of years ago in the special election out on Long Island when Tom Suozzi was running to pick up that seat where George Santos used to be. And you had everyone from Joe Biden to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez trying to get him elected, a very moderate Democrat, just because it was, hey, we need to pick up this seat from the Republicans. So when there's a chance to fight with Republicans, Democrats all tend to look good. And right now, Zohran Mamdani's a Democrat.
I also just think dysfunction in Washington is good for Zohran Mamdani as well. He gets to make the case, I'm an outsider. This is all everybody else. I had nothing to do with this. And if you're sick of this dysfunction from the two parties, maybe give me a look. I don't know if you got a chance to see, Evan, the Dems announced they completed an audit of 2024. Now, we don't totally know what's in it yet because they're holding it until after this election and the Virginia election. I don't blame them. But what would your diagnosis be of the reasons why Democrats lost in 2024?
Well, we did some of this work at Blueprint. We did some postmortem polling, including looking in particular at swing voters who wound up voting for Donald Trump in the swing state. And, there are a lot of things going on in that election. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris having some issues. But one of the big things that I think Democrats really have not internalized was by a 20-point margin, swing voters who wound up with Donald Trump felt that Donald Trump and the Republican Party were talking more about issues than Democrats were. And Democrats were talking more about character and some sort of abstract notions, democracy and things like that. And I don't know that for all the postmortems, for all the think pieces that Democrats have really internalized, that a lot of people, a lot of voters, particularly voters they need, don't feel they have any real policy solutions or are on target when it comes to things. This shutdown is nice because it gives Democrats a chance to talk about healthcare, which is something that voters love hearing Democrats talk about. I hope the postmortem finds something similar and reminds Democrats, hey, talk about the bread and butter issues that people care about, that people expect the Democratic Party to be focused on, standing up for the little guy against the rich and powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying for a long time, like the soup of a campaign, the three things are candidate selection, messaging, and then policy. And if you're not going to talk about the policies, if you're just going to talk about, well, this candidate wasn't great, or we didn't say this thing right, you're not looking at some of the policy problems, I don't know that they're really going to address this stuff, at least in time for midterms in 2028. What do you think, just quickly before we go? Are they in a good place for midterms?
They're in a pretty good place. There are just some structural elements of how this midterm is shaping up, the president's unpopularity, and so on, some good candidate recruitment moves by the Democrats that, in a favorable national polling environment on the generic ballot, that I think would suggest Democrats will retake the House. Now, whether it's a convincing majority or not, more than 10 votes, that really remains to be seen. I have a colleague, Alyssa Cass, who often says, bad ideas beat no ideas every time. We'll see if the Democrats have any ideas that can win them some votes.
Exactly right. Blue wave? I don't know. We'll see. Evan Roth Smith, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate all your perspectives. And thanks to everyone at home for tuning in. Battleground NYC will be back next week, every Monday through Friday, with more news and context and reporting on this important New York City race. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for watching Battleground. We're now joining Live Now's nonstop stream of live and breaking news.
Responsibility. And what does that include? Well, not only an infusion of pro-growth policies like we implemented with the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Working Families Tax Cut package, so many things that are going to help the economy short-term and long-term. But also we have to reduce spending. We have to. The government spends too much. It's too large. It does too many things. It does almost nothing well. As Reagan used to remind us, government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. And so are we in favor of reducing spending? Yes. That we're trying to